What happens when a gangster classic gets pulled out of the past and dropped into the cocaine-fueled world of 1980s Miami? Out of that idea came a film built on huge ambition with a violent new setting and the lead character chasing the American dream. But behind the scenes, the production ran into protests, rising costs, injuries, and a brutal fight just to get the movie released. So what really happened behind the scenes? Let's find out. This is the history of Scarface.
Say hello to my little friend!
The project began at a difficult point in Al Pacino's career. After building his reputation through films like The Godfather, Serpico, and Dog Day Afternoon, he entered the 1980s with a weaker run of projects, including Cruising, Author, and Bobby Deerfield. With his career on the line, he started looking for something strong enough to put him back to where he was. That search led him to the original 1932 Scarface. After seeing it in a Hollywood theatre, he believed it could work as a remake and he took the idea to Martin Bregman. Once they found out that Universal had already purchased the rights to the original film from the Howard Hughes estate, the project started taking shape. Initially, David Rabe was brought in to shape the script, but Pacino and Bregman weren't happy with the direction of that version, so the search continued until Oliver Stone was brought in. At first, Stone was not interested as he didn't want to do a straight remake, but once the shift pulled the story into the cocaine trade and tied it to the Mariel boat lift, it gave the remake a setting that felt far more dangerous than the world of the original film. Once that version came into focus, Stone had something he could work with. He went to Miami and started researching the drug world, speaking with DEA agents, approaching dealers, and buying small amounts of cocaine to keep conversations going. But as that kept building, the problem wasn't doing the research, it was the addiction that came with it. Stone later said that the cocaine was literally kicking his ass, so he left the United States and went to Paris. There, he wrote the script and built a version that kept the rise and fall shape of the original while reshaping it around the modern drug trade. He also kept major themes, plot points, and even some dialogue from the original film. With the project moving on, early on, Martin Bregman turned to Brian De Palma to direct. But the first version didn't stick and the film kept changing directors, so they brought in Sidney Lumet, who tried pushing the movie in a different direction. He wanted to lean more into politics and connect the story more directly to the Reagan-era climate that in his view had allowed the drug trade to flourish. That approach didn't hold and there was a disagreement over the direction of the film, and that led to him leaving the project, which again left the movie hanging in the balance. With Lumet gone, Brian De Palma was brought back in. By that point, the central idea was in place. Even then, there was still unease around that choice because some studio execs worried that De Palma could become too eccentric, too narrow, or too arty for a film of that scale. Eventually, the core story would center on Tony Montana, a Cuban refugee who arrives in Miami with nothing and fights his way up through the drug trade, building wealth and power while his ambition, greed, and the need for control slowly destroy everything around him.
All right, big man, you want to make some big bucks. You know something about cocaine? Dígame. Get in there.
With the project moving forward, Al Pacino was already set as Tony Montana, so the focus shifted to building the rest of the cast around him. The next key role was Manny, and early on, the first choice for that part was John Travolta. As that process continued, Stephen Bauer entered the picture. He was born in Havana and changed his name after moving to Hollywood, but that background immediately stood out. De Palma responded, seeing value in someone who was actually Cuban in the central role, and Martin Bregman felt the same way. Bregman was so convinced that he told Bauer that he was going to star in the movie, even before he completed his audition. At the same time, there was still an expectation in some circles that the role would end up going to someone like John Travolta or Eric Roberts. The idea stayed in place until Bauer's audition, where he performed in front of Pacino, De Palma and Bregman. Once they saw that, they made their decision and Bauer got the role. With Manny in place, the attention moved to Elvira. Bregman was looking at bigger names or rising actresses for that part, and several names were considered. Pacino pushed for Glenn Close, but the studio leaned in a different direction. At that point, Michelle Pfeiffer was only 24 years old and wasn't an established name. Bregman wanted to see her commitment, so he had her pay her own way to attend her screen test. Once she arrived and completed her audition, she got the role. After that, the focus shifted to Gina. Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio had no film credits at that time, but Bregman believed she was perfect for the part. From there, the wider casting process continued and it became long and repetitive, with auditions running over extended periods as more roles were filled. Roles like Frank Lopez were filled with Robert Loggia, and supporting roles included F. Murray Abraham, Pepe Sena, and Gino Silva. With the casting locked in, the next major piece was the music, and that brought in Giorgio Moroder. He was already known for his work in disco-era synthesizer music and for his collaborations with Donna Summer. That choice pushed the film in a clear direction. Instead of a traditional crime score, the music leaned into a glossy, very 1980s sound. As the score settled into the film, that connection became even clearer. The sound matched the life Tony was chasing, something loud, polished, and self-made. The music became a defining part of the film's identity, and it remains one of the reasons Scarface feels so locked into its own time and style. Once the film was ready, Universal and De Palma began clashing with the MPAA over the film's rating. The first submission of the film got an X rating, so cuts and trims were tried and revised versions were sent back, but that X stayed in place. So Bregman took the fight further. He demanded an appeal hearing and treated it like a courtroom battle, bringing in witnesses to defend the film as a serious social commentary rooted in real cases. The appeal ended in the filmmaker's favor and the film got an R rating. With the rating issues now sorted and all the removed footage edited back in, Universal positioned it as a major Christmas title, but the studio was still not fully sure on how it would perform. That uncertainty showed before the film even opened wide. The critics' screening went really bad, and the critics attacked the film hard, calling it overly violent and dangerous. When the film finally opened in December '83, the same tension carried over. By that point, it was already clear that the film was dividing audiences, with a lot of them walking out of the premiere. The box office reflected those issues. It made about $4 million in its first week and ended up finishing in 16th place in that year's chart, and it only barely made its costs back. It looked dead on arrival. Then the film started pulling the late-night crowd, and that changed everything. People kept coming back, they quoted the lines and turned the screenings into something far louder and more alive. It ended up drawing comparisons to the Rocky Horror Picture Show because of the way audiences responded to it. But long before all this chaos, the real trouble had already started behind the scenes. Al Pacino initially pushed hard for a proper rehearsal time, and that shaped the production from the start. That process lasted around 2.5 weeks, and it gave the cast a strong sense of rhythm before the cameras rolled. At the same time, Pacino was building Tony Montana in detail. He worked with a dialect coach, spent time around Cubans, and kept asking how certain lines should sound until he found the voice he wanted. Then there was his scar. Pacino had his own backstory for it and wanted it placed across the eye area as if it had came from a knife fight, but the production kept struggling to make it look convincing. Different tests failed and the problem dragged on, and the original makeup artist was eventually replaced just before filming began. After an emergency test was done on a Friday before the Monday shoot, the issue was only solved at the last moment. Then the production ran straight into its first major problem. The plan had been to shoot in Miami, with principal photography set to begin in November 1982. But once the local Cuban-American community learned what the film was about, backlash started building fast. Protests followed, and the city commissioner became one of the loudest opponents. He objected to the idea of a film linking Cuban refugees to drugs and criminality, and he used his position to make life difficult for the production. From there, the situation got worse. Negotiations over permits and locations became more hostile, and the people involved in the film started getting threats. One person connected to the production said the police told him to carry a sidearm for protection. In another incident, Pacino's private number was reportedly obtained, and he was getting phone calls telling him if the film went ahead, he would have a lot of problems. At that point, Miami became too much of a risk, so the production moved it back to California. As the shoot continued, the violence became one of the hardest parts of the production. One of the earliest big stunts involved a body being dropped from a helicopter. The stunt performer said it was one of the most frightening things he had ever done. But after the stunt was completed, De Palma decided it had to be done again because the performer's hands had not been tied behind his back. The stunt performer wasn't happy, but a second version was filmed over water at Universal, but it was still as dangerous as the first time. Then there was the Babylon Club sequence, which became a nightmare of mirrors, reflections, and camera placement. The set was filled with reflective surfaces, so mirrors had to be mounted on pivots and angled carefully to stop the crew from appearing in the shots. After that, the sequence had to be rigged so the mirrors could blow apart safely during the attack. Because the mirrors were made by real glass, it made things even harder, and Pacino had to hit his movements exactly so he could appear to be under fire without being injured. The most infamous sequence, though, was the chainsaw scene. The motel exterior was filmed in Miami Beach, but the bathroom itself was built on 2 sound stages in Los Angeles. Then the film moved toward its biggest sequence, and the chaos went up another level. The production built Tony's mansion set on a huge stage, and before shooting even began, the set caught fire, and the fire department had to come in and put the fire out. The set was badly damaged, so it was rebuilt at a bigger scale than it was ever before. As all of this went on, the pressure inside the production kept rising. De Palma's working style meant elaborate setups, constant camera movement, and a high number of takes. Actors remembered doing 20, 25, and even 30 takes. Because of that, everything slowed down, and every extra take meant more money. The original schedule plan was around 66 days, roughly a 2-month shoot, but the film pushed it so far beyond it stretched toward the 7-month mark, and the budget climbed with it. By then, Universal was getting really nervous. There was real talk inside the studio about replacing De Palma, and some people were openly asking why the picture had not been shut down. At the same time, another fight was getting worse. Oliver Stone had written Scarface as a more grounded and realistic crime story, and as the shoot went on, he felt the film was being pushed further away from that and toward something glossy and operatic. He attended the dailies and argued with De Palma and became increasingly angry over scenes and dialogue being cut. De Palma eventually didn't want him at the dailies anymore, so Stone eventually became banned from set. Then came the production's most serious accident. Pacino grabbed the barrel of the weapon in the movie's climax after firing it heavily, and it was red hot. The burns were that bad that he was taken to hospital and he couldn't shoot for 2 to 3 weeks. Somewhere in the middle of all of that, Steven Spielberg visited the set and ended up directing one camera setup after De Palma told him to shoot whatever he wanted.
Ooh, look at that fucking thing, that looks like a lizard.
But while the film struggled to find its footing in cinemas, its story didn't end there. It began to build a new life once it reached home media. When Scarface arrived on VHS, it found the audience it had missed the first time around. Viewers started renting it, then watching it again, then sharing it with others. Copies moved from hand to hand, and the film spread far beyond its original release. From there, the next step came with DVD. When the film went into that format, it didn't slow down. The releases became hugely successful and the numbers reflected that demand. After its success on DVD, the film continued to move with the new formats. Scarface was released on Blu-ray in 2011. And then in 2019, it received a 4K Ultra HD release. For fans who want to add the film to their collection, I've added a link in the description below, and there should also be a card popping up on screen to help you check it out.
Say hello to my little friend!
As the film kept growing, it moved far beyond what anyone involved had expected. It was no longer just a movie people remembered from its original run. It had become something audiences kept returning to, and that steady repeat viewing helped turn it into a cult classic. From there, it spread further into pop culture. The lines, the imagery, and the character of Tony Montana started showing up across entertainment, and the film began taking a life of its own. By the mid-80s, the film had become a major touchstone, and Tony Montana had turned into a symbol of ambition, power, wealth, hardness, and self-invention. As that kept happening, Scarface also stopped being just a film and became a brand. Its imagery moved into merchandise, including clothes, coasters, action figures, and other products. That reach became even bigger once hip-hop culture embraced it. The film was later placed on the American Film Institute's list of the top 10 gangster films, which showed just how far its reputation had shifted from those early reactions. As for my own view on it, Scarface is one of my all-time favorite gangster movies. It's right up there with The Godfather Part 2, and honestly, it's hard to separate them. Everything about this movie just works, from Pacino's performance to the cinematography, the gritty feel, and the story that just keeps pulling you in. Even the comedy that's in there, it's used just right, and that gives the film even more personality without taking anything away from its tone. Manny is a great example of it because every time he shows up, he brings a completely different kind of energy. He's an absolute lunatic, and the way he carries himself, the way he talks, and the whole hungry for women attitude just add another layer to the film. Then when you widen that out to the rest of the cast, that's where the film gets even stronger. Sosa is fantastic, Elvira is great, and the gangsters all feel right, and even the smaller roles land exactly the way they should. It's not just one great performance carrying everything, it's the whole thing working together, and from top to bottom, it's absolutely fantastic. Next time, we dive into another classic movie. Until then, why don't you check out our previous video on Collateral.
I got another DOA.
He's already killed witnesses. He's coming to kill you.
Thanks for watching, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.